A while ago, I made a video about NBA super teams that almost happened. In that video, I believed all of those teams could have been much better if the trades went through. However, in this video, we're gonna take a look at a missed opportunity. A super team that could have potentially formed if a trade did not happen. I'm talking about the 1993 NBA Draft, where the Orlando Magic selected Chris Webber with the first overall pick. But then, on draft night, they traded him away for Penny Hardaway, the third pick of the draft, plus 3 future first-round picks. At first, it might have seemed like a huge haul, but Magic fans were generally pissed off. Webber was a massive name, a huge star at Michigan, ESPN's National Player of the Year, the Naismith Prep Player of the Year, and Mr. Basketball of Michigan. While Hardaway, on the other hand, was not as well known, although he would go on to make a name for himself. The Magic essentially passed on the chance to pair c-webb with Shaq, the first overall pick of the previous year, and would go on to become an all-time legendary center, the league's most dominant player for so many years. In this video, I'm gonna talk about the circumstances surrounding this trade. I'll talk about how well they could have played together, or if this duo could have been better than the Shaq and Penny duo. And I'll grab some notable quotes from old articles back in the day and analyze the opinions at that time. How far could they have gotten in the playoffs? Could they have won any championships if they stayed together? How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and let's get started. First, let's talk about this trade and whether or not it was a steal for the Magic. Like I mentioned, the trade was the number 1 pick, Chris Webber, for the number 3 pick, Penny Hardaway, along with 3 future first-rounders. The problem was, none of these picks had any effect during the Shaq era in Orlando, because the picks were in 1996, 1998, and 2000. Shaq left the team to join the Lakers in the summer of 1996. But even so, they still made some terrible selections, especially in the 96 draft. They had the 11th pick in such a legendary draft class, yet they chose Todd Fuller. He played only about 200 games for his career and averaged fewer than 4 points a game. To make it worse, the picks right after him were Kobe Bryant, Peja Stojakovic, Steve Nash, and even Jermaine O'Neal. Imagine this. If Shaq stayed in Orlando and they used their pick to take Kobe in 96, they could have had a trio of Shaq, Kobe, and Penny. But anyway, we're getting off topic. So with their 1998 pick, they ended up with Keon Clark, another guy with a short career. Then with their pick in 2000, they got Mike Miller, the best selection they made in a long time. But even so, was it worth it? Basically, in hindsight, this trade was mainly just Chris Webber for Penny Hardaway, cause the 3 picks they got in the deal had no impact on the Shaq era. You might be wondering, why did the Magic make this trade in the first place? Did they believe that highly in Penny? At the time, it was seen very unfavorably by Magic fans. Well, according to former GM Pat Williams, he stated, "We brought in Webber twice, and I think we had a very good handle on him, but Penny Hardaway would not accept the fact that we were going to take Webber. He kept calling us, even on that last weekend before the draft, saying, 'I will come back. I will do whatever you guys want. I am your player, even though you may not know it.' In those days, you could do whatever you wanted, so we set up a full court scrimmage, and Hardaway was just brilliant. That gave us a whole different view on draft day. We knew that Golden State, picking 3rd, was anxious to get a big guy. So then, when Warriors GM Don Nelson contacted him, this is what Nelly said. 'You take Webber or Sean Bradley, I don't care which one, but we'll take Hardaway at 3 for you and give you 3 future first-rounders for your trouble.' Well, a good thing they didn't take Sean Bradley. That would have been pretty bad for the Warriors. Regardless, it was still pretty bad for the Warriors, as Webber only stayed there for 1 season, where he ran into problems with Coach Nelson. Anyway, moving on, the real question is, would this frontcourt duo of Shaq and c-webb be better than Penny plus Shaq? I mean, you gotta remember Penny and Shaq reached the NBA Finals in 1995. For a short period of time, the Magic were at the top of the Eastern Conference, and even beat Jordan's Bulls after he made his first comeback. While they had good chemistry on the court, off the court it was a different story. While Shaq was clearly the better player, Penny started to become very popular, getting more endorsements, more sponsorships, and at one point, the Magic even planned to offer him a bigger contract than Shaq. Perhaps it was jealousy. That's the reason most superstar duos break apart. Years after his retirement, even Shaq admitted that his ego got in the way of their relationship. That ultimately led to his departure in 1996. However, would the same jealousy happen between Shaq and c-webb? I don't think so, because Shaq has always thought very highly of Webber. I believe part of it was because he knew Webber when he was very young, and he knew that Webber was just as big of a name as he was back in college and high school. So when it came to fame and notoriety, they were on fairly equal terms back in the early 90s. Another thing to note is that in his early years, Webber was not as good as Penny. Certainly not good enough to be favored over Shaq if he was in a Magic uniform. As a result, there would be a clear hierarchy. Shaq would dominate the paint and Webber would be his sidekick, his right-hand man. With Webber's exceptional passing skills, court vision, and handles that rivaled any wing player, they would work very well together. The issue is, Webber and Penny would have almost opposite timelines when it came to injuries. What I mean by that is, in Webber's early years, he was riddled with injury, but then reached his peak in the 2000s with the Kings. On the other hand, Penny's early years were absurdly dominant, but he fell off quickly after because of knee problems. For example, Webber made his first All-Star game in 1997. Penny made his last All-Star game in 1998. So, if we assume both of their careers go the same way as it did, I don't think Orlando would have made the finals in 1995. That was the year that Webber got seriously injured in the original timeline. However, if we also assume that Webber and Shaq don't have the same chemistry issues or feuds off the court like what happened with Penny, I could see Shaq wanting to stay in Orlando for much longer. Let's do a quick what if. In the 1996 offseason, a 24-year-old Shaquille O'Neal accepted the Lakers' offer of 7 years, $120 million, after getting lowballed by the Magic. Eventually, the Magic upped their offer to 7 years, $109 million, but ultimately, Shaq went to LA. However, in this case, what if Shaq accepts the 7 years, $109 million from Orlando? And what if c-webb chooses to stay as well? This means they would play together for their entire primes. And they gotta win a few championships, right? In the Eastern Conference, they would for sure make the finals multiple times because the rest of the conference was very weak in the early 2000s. In fact, after Jordan's retirement in 1998, I could see this duo carrying the Magic to the finals for many consecutive years, up until 2003 for sure. I mean, I know it depends how they surround the rest of the team, but just building around these two stars, I'm confident in saying that they'd easily defeat the Pacers, the Nets, and Sixers. Those were the main teams coming out of the East. At Webber's absolute peak, he was just as good as guys like Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett. It was just the injuries later in his career holding him back. And that's why I'm saying, after 2003, in this what-if scenario, I don't think the Magic could win any more championships. That's when Webber's body started to break down, culminating in a major knee injury in 2003 where he tore his ACL. Prime Webber and Prime Shaq would obliterate any front court in that conference. Considering the early 2000s were originally dominated by the Lakers and Spurs, Shaq is no longer on the Lakers, so it's only the Spurs to worry about. I'd say this new Shaq-Webber duo could win the 1999 title, maybe the 2000 and 2001 championships too. I mean, their only real competition would be the Spurs and perhaps the Pistons too. In this what-if scenario, Shaq would still win multiple championships, Webber would no longer be known as the guy who never won a title, so maybe he'd be in the Hall of Fame by now. The Orlando Magic would have a legit dynasty. The Lakers, though, will not be the same dominant force with just a young Kobe. The entire NBA landscape would change if the Magic just kept their #1 draft pick. Anyway, that sums up the story of this super team that never was. At the end of the day, both C-Webb and Penny were incredible players who saw their careers get devastated by injuries. Ridiculous primes, two of the most unique players we've ever seen, yet they both had tragic downfalls, some of the quickest fall-offs we ever saw from two superstars. The difference is, maybe Webber could have convinced Shaq to stay in Orlando. Or maybe not, maybe Shaq was going to Hollywood regardless, but it's certainly fun to think about. By the end of their careers, you could tell Shaq deeply respects C-Webb, saying that it's a travesty he's not in the Hall of Fame yet, and even admitting the refs helped the Lakers in 2002. There's certainly a lot more respect between them, so if the Magic kept him, it would have been really interesting. Anyway, that's all folks, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. If this what-if scenario actually happened, how many championships do you think they could have won? Do you think Shaq would actually stay in Orlando if C-Webb was there with him? Thank you everybody so much for watching, I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.